Welcome into 101 Sports. We just had a really great weekend of college football, some of the best games of the year so far. So I'm excited to do my week 4 analysis and takeaways. So let's get right into it. As usual, I start off with a little bit of right wrong. What was I right about on the weekend? What did I get wrong? First thing, the Clemson Tigers. So they defeated NC State 59-35. It wasn't even that close. Clemson, second straight game that they've just crushed their opponent the first time, scoring touchdowns virtually every possession, and the game's been over at halftime. Um, but yeah, so before the season, I picked Clemson to make the playoff, go 11-1 with a loss to Georgia, and then losing the ACC title game to Miami. So obviously, we'll see if that ends up coming true. But just in general, after the Georgia game, people were talking like Clemson was a program of the past, like Dabo didn't know what he was doing. And I came and I said that, I was buying stock in Clemson, that I believed in this team, that Georgia wasn't left on the schedule. The team was going to improve with the young wide receivers, with Klubnik improving, and it was just a matter of how good Georgia is at week 1 in the season. That would happen to a lot of teams. And so I feel like these next games they've had afterwards have just kind of proved that with how dominant they've been, especially offensively. Because I didn't think their offense would look this good. And I really believed in this team before the season, and even after the Georgia game, I still did. But their offense has been crazy, crazy good. The receivers have looked dynamic, which is a good change from the past few years for Clemson. And Klubnik's looked really good. He's made some throws that I didn't know he could make based off watching him last year. So I've been really impressed with Clemson, but I've also been right about Clemson so far. Now, what was I wrong about? First thing is North Carolina and Syracuse. So I made a video, a buy, sell, hold college football video, and I said I thought North Carolina and Syracuse could emerge over the next few weeks as not true ACC contenders, but because of the light schedule, they would have really good records, and people might think that they could be contenders because I think there's going to be, because the ACC's weak, I think they're going to be looking, the media that is, looking for teams who can challenge Miami, and I think Clemson will be one of them. But I said I thought North Carolina and Syracuse, because of easy schedules, I didn't even think they were that good, especially North Carolina. I said I don't think they're very good. They just have a weak schedule. Apparently wasn't weak enough, though, because they lose at home 70-50 to James Madison. Just really embarrassing game. Tons of mistakes. I mean, the offense, there's moments where it looks really good, right? The quarterback throws for 475 yards, but a lot of that's because you're playing catch-up. He also throws 2 interceptions, including a pick six. You have a punt block for a touchdown. And then you need to run Amarian Hampton's great, 139 yards on 19 carries, but too many self-inflicted mistakes there for North Carolina, so I was wrong about them. And then Syracuse, same deal. I thought schedule's pretty light. They could maybe look like they're going to cause some damage in the ACC, be like a small kind of threat. But instead, they lose to Stanford at home on the road. They lose to Stanford at home on Friday off a walk-off field goal. Stanford, obviously, I don't think is a very good team this year. They lost to TCU the beginning of the year, and they weren't very good last year. So another thing, just off the mark there. Maybe these teams can bounce back, but right now it looks like I was wrong about them looking good over the next couple of weeks. All right, now something I was right about, and that is Oklahoma State, right? So they lose to Utah 22-19, but it's how they lost. I talked about in the stock video how I was selling stock in Oklahoma State for these next couple of games, not because I think they're bad, but because they were supposed to be a team that could lean on their physicality, establish a run game, and that hadn't been there this year. They were relying on Alan Bowman. And Bowman had played really well so far this year. He was able to lead a comeback against Arkansas, and he looked very good against Tulsa. So I thought people were kind of I think Oklahoma State climbed to top 15 in the AP poll. But in my opinion, they weren't top 15 because they were relying on something that wasn't going to be consistent. Like Alan Bowman can have really good games, but if you rely on him, he's going to have turnovers, he's going to make mistakes, and he's going to have games where he just doesn't play well. And I thought against a team like Utah, his hot streak would come to an end, and it did. Now, I was a little bit surprised that Utah was able to make so many mistakes with the turnovers they had and still win, and even without Cam Rising playing. So that was a little bit impressive by Utah, actually. But for the most part, kind of what I expected with Oklahoma State, and I was right about that. And then final thing that I was wrong about, we have Brigham Young, BYU. Another team I thought they were, kind of after a 3-0 start, I thought they were more pretenders, and I thought with Kansas State coming next that Kansas State would be able to beat them on the road at BYU and kind of prove that BYU wasn't for real. Instead, BYU rolls Kansas State 38-9 in really weird fashion because Kansas State's up, I think, 6-0 with like 2 minutes left in the half, and then by the 11-minute mark in the third, so like 6 to 7 minutes of gameplay, Uh, BYU scored 31 points, and then it was 31-6, and the game was just out of hand. Avery Johnson threw some interceptions. There's a punt in there for a touchdown. There's a fumble for a touchdown. Just everything went wrong in like 7 minutes for Kansas State. But you got to give credit to BYU for that, for forcing turnovers, making big plays. It's not something I thought they were going to be able to do against Kansas State. So I was wrong about BYU. Next up, what was the best game of the weekend? And we'll break it down. First up, the runner-ups. I've got Colorado over Baylor, an absolutely fantastic finish. So Colorado's down. They're coming back. First, they get that terrible spot. They convert on third down, but the refs mark them short, lose like 15 to 20 seconds. A terrible call because the clock just stopped. And I thought like Colorado was done after that, and it was just going to be a brutal call that the refs kind of cost them a chance to win. But then Shedeur Sanders hits Shepard by the goal line. He gets it over the defender, and he drops it for a chance to tie the game. But and then comes back and hits the next Hail Mary. So basically 2 straight plays that could have worked as Hail Marys. Don't know what Baylor was doing defensively to allow 2 straight plays that are basically Hail Marys that could have worked. So that's on Baylor. And then it goes to overtime. Just fantastic finish. Colorado was able to win. Travis Hunter forced the fumble at the goal line in OT. Once again, Colorado comes. There are 2 players in Shedeur and Travis Hunter make the big plays to win the game, come through for them. I still don't think it's a very good team. I think your home game against Baylor was one of the easiest games left on the schedule, and they still struggled mightily. So I think Colorado, as a team, you still got to be concerned, but it's still a great win, a really fun win. The field storming was really cool to see, and it was a great game to watch. Then Missouri over Vanderbilt goes into double overtime. I thought when Vandy stopped Missouri forced the field goal, I thought we were going to get one of the biggest upsets of the season. Unfortunately, Vandy couldn't get it done. Both kickers struggled, with Missouri's missing 2 in regulation, and then Vandy's missing 1. It's weird because he made a 57-yarder, but then missed from 50, and then in overtime, with a chance to send it to triple overtime, he misses from 30-some yards. And, it did start to rain a little bit, but he's also missed against Virginia Tech with a chance to win. So the kicker, I have some questions about him performing in the clutch moments for Vanderbilt. But I was rooting for Vanderbilt, but I also don't like seeing triple overtime and alternating 2-point conversions because I think that's a terrible rule change. But the game was great to see, and it was so close to being a huge upset, which would have been crazy. Kind of disappointed we didn't get it, but still a great game. And then the runner-ups are basically all of Friday night games. I already talked about Syracuse, but that Stanford game was still really great. Comes down to a walk-off field goal. Nebraska, Illinois. I thought Nebraska was going to win, and they probably, should have, in quotes there. Dylan Raiola misses his guy on that in the end of regulation that could have won the game, essentially. But I feel like both teams trying to give it away, with Raiola fumbling twice, but Illinois can't get it either time. Then they punt, and then Altmaier fumbles, and then Raiola misses his receiver, and then the kicker misses the field goal. So it ends up, going to overtime. And in overtime, that was just a brutal possession for Nebraska with the sacks. I mean, it just all came undone. I feel like Nebraska fans, there was a lot of hype around Nebraska with, I saw a talk of could they be 7-0 when they play Ohio State. The schedule's really workable, or they had dark horse playoff team, and then you lose your home conference opener against Illinois. So it's really tough for them, but it was a great game, and I don't think Nebraska fans should be concerned. I think the team's still good. I just think Illinois is also a pretty good team. I didn't think that in the preseason, but now seeing them play, they've been pretty good. They're a lot better on defense than I thought, and I think it was just 2 pretty evenly matched teams playing, and Illinois just a few plays went their way. So nothing to be too concerned about if you're a Nebraska fan. And then the final one, I didn't even see that much of it, but Washington State beating San Jose State 54-52 in double overtime. And I think San Jose State peaked at 99.9% chance of victory, according to ESPN, when they were up with 20 seconds left, and Washington State needed to go 40 yards, and they did it. So crazy game. All the Friday night games, just crazy. But I say all that to say that the best game of the day, or best game of the weekend, was Michigan-USC. Michigan wins this game 27-24. It was really fun to watch. I think I mentioned before, I do root for Michigan. And Michigan, I picked them to win the game, I believe 23-21. So I was pretty close, actually. But it's first half, I got a lot of what I was expecting, but even better from Michigan, because I didn't think their defense would be able to limit USC to 3. So I was impressed by that. And then I got offensively, I was like, yes, this is what I thought we'd get. Physical, run the ball, and it was even better than I thought it would be. And then the second half, it was so much worse than I thought it would be. They had like 9 yards of offense before their final drive, and USC started being able to move the ball really easily. And then the defense kind of saved, like Will Johnson gets the pick six, which was huge. I do think he's the best corner in the country, and he comes up with his second pick six of the season. And then the other play that was brutal, though, for Michigan is you strip Miller Moss on 3rd and goal. Grant recovers. He's running it back like 30 yards, and then the running back's able to take it away from him, set up USC with a new set of downs, and they score a touchdown. That was brutal, but none of that ended up costing Michigan because Khalil Mullings puts the team on his back. And then that final drive where they go, 70 yards or so, and 60 of it's Khalil Mullings. Or no, 80 yards, right? And because Mullings had the 63-yard run in the middle there where he's breaking tackles. And when they threw the ball on one of the goal plays, I'm yelling at TV, like, just give Mullings the ball. Because he was, at the end of the game, he was the only offense they had. I think, just seeing Michigan, this game coming down to a goal line stand, and it was kind of just a microcosm of all that's been talked about, right? With USC, are they physical enough against, the big bad Michigan Wolverines? And it comes down to 4th and goal from the 1 goal line stand, and Michigan powers it in. So it just encapsulated all the talking points of USC joining the Big Ten in this opening game, which I thought was great, and just the intensity of seeing Michigan offense, which had 9 yards the whole half, and actually come away with a game-winning touchdown drive after key mistakes, like I said, with the fumble that they end up giving back to USC, missing an extra point. That's the reason they needed a touchdown. It was really, it was a lot. It was really chaotic half. On Michigan's side, I think actually both sides had some injuries you got to worry about. Will Johnson left. You're already missing Colston Loveland. So that's concerning. And then Khalil Mullings, you would think, is now running back 1 over Donovan Edwards, definitively. And then quarterback, I'm still not sure what they're going to do because, yes, Orji adds a running element, but, I don't think he even showed that he can't pass the ball. They're just not even willing to let him try. I think his confidence has to be low because his coach doesn't believe in him to even try, simple throws for the most part. But I don't think you can go back to Davis Warren, so the quarterback situation's still up in the air. And I don't think Michigan's in the preseason I thought they were really good. I no longer think that. And then on USC side, you also had some injuries, so that you got to worry about that. And then USC, I said I was holding on them before buying in because I wasn't as high on LSU as everybody else was because I think in the preseason I picked LSU to be a 7-5 team. I didn't think they were that good, so I thought USC got a little overhyped from that. And I didn't think LSU was as physical as Michigan was going to be. So I was right about that. I still think USC is a very good team, but I feel like it was kind of a bad matchup, and it's just tough to win on the road against a team like Michigan with all their pedigree. But it was a great game to watch, my favorite of the day. So some other notes before we move on to the wrap it up. I have some concerns about LSU and Notre Dame. I already had concerns about LSU, but now I feel like it's just a thing where they're playing to their competition because you play, down to the wire USC. Then you play down to the wire against South Carolina, who I don't think are similar. I think USC is better than South Carolina. And then UCLA, you're tied 17-17 at halftime. And UCLA just got crushed by Indiana. And I know it's not each team's different each week, but it's just weird that LSU seems to be playing to their competition. And I feel like that's on the coaching staff, so I have some concern there. And then Notre Dame, same concerns with the offense. Some days it looks like it's clicking when you're crushing Purdue. And then, the Northern Illinois, the Miami, Ohio game, it doesn't look good at all. The defense is going to be able to carry them to a lot of wins still. But Riley Leonard, he makes plays with his legs, but lots of questions throwing the ball. Then Florida State and Florida finally get in the win column. Well, Florida already was, but Florida State finally gets in the win column. Florida gets an SEC win. And, good for them. They, those fan bases were struggling so far this year. Florida State, it was ugly. They did not look good, but they were able to beat Cal. And then Florida puts up a lot of points, but Mississippi State's awful. So, again, I don't think either win signifies that these teams are going to be good moving forward. But for once, both teams won in a week of college football this year. And then just Louisville with the questions. I just think sneaky team to look out for. They play Notre Dame next week. And I think Louisville is a team with enough offensive firepower that Notre Dame could definitely like there's a world where Notre Dame's defense is just good enough to shut down Louisville, make it the kind of game Notre Dame wants, and win it. But there's definitely, like, if Louisville's receivers are able to make enough plays or establish a run game, or Tyler Shuck plays, just pretty well, because of how bad Notre Dame can be on offense, this could be a game where if Louisville gets to 24, that Notre Dame just can't get there, because there's some days where Notre Dame just can't, depending on how Riley Leonard's playing. There's some days like in the Miami Ohio game where he's just missing wide open receivers rolling out, and that's supposed to be a strength, is throwing on the run. So Louisville, if they beat Notre Dame, then you're looking at a team that could join Miami and Clemson as the top tier of the ACC. Who is the most impressive team this weekend? I'll preface it with saying I've been wrong about them so far this year, and that is the Tennessee Volunteers. I picked Oklahoma to win this game. I thought with Nick Anderson coming back, Andrew Anthony coming back to pair with Deion Burks, this was going to be the game where the offense puts it all together and was going to be able to put up points on a Tennessee secondary, which I have questions about. Obviously, that did not happen. Jackson Arnold plays so bad he ends up getting benched. Just brutal game for the Oklahoma offense all around. And the thing about this is, I feel like Tennessee fans are just going to be so mad because I picked them to lose to NC State, and they beat them 51-10. And then I come on and say that, if NC State was able to tie, I don't think NC State could have won the game. I'm just saying that the pick six at the end of the half, if that, say he throws a touchdown there and it's 10-10 before half, it's just a much closer game. So I just thought 51-10 wasn't indicative of how the game could have gone. It's just like NC State got its spirits broken right at the end of the half. But obviously, I was wrong about that. Tennessee's much better than NC State. But then this Oklahoma game, I feel like it's kind of the same thing. The defense played really well for Oklahoma. They give the ball to Oklahoma at the 5, and then Arnold fumbles it right back. And then they strip Nico again, and then Arnold throws a lateral. I actually thought it was forward pass, so I didn't like the call of a lateral to give it back. But still, that's what it's called, so that's what happened. So both times the defense forced a turnover, Oklahoma gives it right back. But obviously, this time, 25-15 was not, it was worse than this. Tennessee dominated them just completely. The offense for Oklahoma was inept. The defense, like I said, was good. But the thing about this, I'm still not fully sold on Tennessee, because I think if there's a team that Tennessee has Georgia and Alabama left on their schedule. But say they played, let's just say Texas, Georgia, or Alabama. Those are the three teams I think are the best in the SEC. That's kind of who I think Tennessee's trying to catch, right? I'm not saying I don't believe in Tennessee as a good team. I think they're clearly a top 10 team. But you're competing in the SEC. You're competing with Alabama, Texas, Georgia, maybe an Ole Miss you throw in there, maybe a Missouri. But we'll go with those top three, right? All of which who I think have really good offensive lines, who are going to be able to limit Tennessee's pass rush. All of which have good quarterbacks, and Ewers, Milroe, or Beck, even the backups with Manning there, right? All have, I think, good to great weapons. Texas has the best, but Alabama with Journey Bernard, Ryan Williams is very good. Georgia with their running backs are great, and then Colby Young, London Humphreys, the tight ends there like Lawson Lucky are very good. That I think with a team that has a good offensive line, which Oklahoma and NC State couldn't hold up, and has good receivers, which Oklahoma State and NC State do, with a quarterback who can get the ball to them, I now realize that maybe Oklahoma and NC State don't have that. I think that's when Tennessee's defense won't look nearly as good. And then I think Nico is still a young quarterback who will make mistakes. The good news for them is he's made mistakes and they've been able to get through it. Because like I said, he made a bad interception in the NC State game, 2 strip sacks this game. So I still think there's a lot of room to beat this Tennessee team right now, for if you're a top caliber team, which I do think they're very good. I just think I'm not all the way sold. Maybe I'm not giving their defense enough credit, but I think if they verse a team that's really good on offense, their defense won't look quite as good, and I think Nico can still make mistakes against a very good defense like in Oklahoma. So like I said, I still have them as top 10 team. I'm just not ready to have them in that top tier of the SEC with Alabama, Texas, Georgia, and I would still have them behind Ole Miss. But we'll see. I could be completely wrong. I've been wrong the past 2 games I picked with Tennessee in it, right? So that's that. But I digress and say that Tennessee was the most impressive team of the weekend. I thought they'd lose the game, and instead they won in dominant fashion. So they were the most impressive team. Finally, what are the biggest takeaways from this weekend of college football? Number 3, I think the group of 5 playoff spots wide open. So in the preseason, I picked Tulane to make it. They already have 2 losses to Kansas State and Oklahoma. I think they're still alive because those are, at least for the moment, top 25 losses. So, I think you're not completely eliminated. Then I think a lot of people had Memphis, but Memphis loses to Navy this weekend. I think 49-44 or 46. But so, there's question marks there. Maybe people at App State, they're not as good as people thought. James Madison beats North Carolina, I think enters the race now. But so I think, UNLV's in the race. Boise State, people think's good, but they have the loss to Oregon. Liberty was able to beat Eastern Carolina and stay alive, but they looked vulnerable early. And I'm not sure East Carolina is great. They lost to, App State. App State got rolled by South Alabama. Obviously, transitive property doesn't apply in college football, but it's just something to look out for. I think South Florida is really good, but 2 losses to Alabama and Miami. So I think it's just that last playoff spot at this point for the group of 5 team, wide open. Northern Illinois, people thought maybe emerge, they lose. So yeah, just anyone could really get it. And that's kind of my takeaway from this weekend watching group of 5 teams play. And second, I kind of just said here, you got to take each game with a grain of salt, because I think you'll see the results aren't consistent, teams aren't consistent, right? UCLA can lose to Indiana, 42-10, 45-10, then be tied with LSU at the half. That doesn't mean Indiana would crush LSU. So it's that kind of thing. Notre Dame goes from crushing Purdue 52-0 or something to really struggling with Miami of Ohio. Northern Illinois beats Notre Dame, loses to Buffalo. It's just like Kansas State looks great against Arizona, then falls apart against BYU. It's just each game you get a different output. Vanderbilt loses to Georgia State, then comes super close to upsetting Missouri, who's ranked 6th in the country. So just don't focus too much on any singular game. Evaluate the whole body of work, and you gotta take each game that happens with a grain of salt, because the team could be completely different the next week, or at least play completely different. And my final takeaway is that there will be a lot of parity. We've already seen Georgia struggled with a 1-point win against Kentucky. Ohio State, I thought, looked somewhat vulnerable against Marshall, and I don't think Marshall is a great team by any means. They're 1-2. Now, they lost to Virginia Tech, who we've seen lose to Rutgers and Vanderbilt. And I thought Marshall they lost 49-14, but in the first beginnings of the game, I thought Ohio State looked vulnerable. I think we saw Penn State struggle against Bowling Green. We've seen Oregon struggle against Idaho, Boise State. Obviously, Michigan struggled. Alabama and Miami, I thought, had a little bit of issues with South Florida. Texas hasn't really struggled yet this year, so it'll be interesting to see. Same with Ole Miss, no really struggles there. But I just think no team has been dominant enough, and the teams have been inconsistent enough to believe that there's going to be a lot of parity. And there always is, but I think especially a lot of parity this year in college football. But that's my biggest takeaway from the weekend. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.